Hello, my fellow writers. My name's Laura, and welcome to Learn to Writer, the channel where we talk about the mental difficulties of being a writer. If this is your first time here, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you for joining us. And if you've been here before, then may the words be ever in your favor. Today, I want to talk a bit about voice, voice in stories. It's something that I remember them talking about in English class when I was in high school, and like they'd trot out these examples of, oh yeah, listen to this strong voice in this generally white male's thing that we were reading. I remember being like, okay, well then I have to develop that voice, right? Because like this is the voice of someone who is published and is still around for, however long. They don't really do a good job of explaining it, because what ends up happening is that is your experience with voice, right? Is some teacher in an English class pulls out stories and says, here, this voice is really great in this story. And you read it and you're like, yes, this story has a lot of voice. You can read it and you can see it and you can like understand that that's voice, but like no one ever really explains what voice is. For a long time, I think I thought that voice was something you purposefully did in order to make your writing a certain way. And it isn't really that. Then I would write, and there wouldn't be a voice there. And all of these masters, all of these authors, who it's like they write classics, you assume that your voice is supposed to be something like that. Very distinctive, very whatever. And it turns out that is not the way voice works at all. And no one really ever explained this to me. I kind of had to figure it out myself. Part of it was learning from my writing mentor, Gabriela Pereira, who was talking about the fact that you don't have to find your voice. You already have your voice. I took that class and I kind of understood that it was basically I was just going to write however I would write. And so that's what I did for a really long time. And then I finally had an experience where I legit learned what voice was. And so I want to share that with you because it might help make it a little bit more clear for you. If you've watched other videos on my channel, you might have seen that I go on the Writing Excuses cruise most every year. Writing Excuses is a podcast that talks about being, learning how to do skills of being a writer. And it's run by now Mary Robinette Kowal, Dan Wells, Howard Taylor. And back when I first started going on this cruise, Brandon Sanderson was also part of it. I admit that Brandon Sanderson is the reason that I started listening to Writing Excuses, but I've gotten to know the other hosts very, very well at this point. And so it's like a week-long thing where you have the instructors do classes and all that kind of stuff. And so for a week, I was listening to Dan Wells and Mary Robinette Kowal talk. They did lectures, and then I would also just chat with them, because they're people, and we were there for a week. A lot of times, you'll meet authors, and it'll be at a panel at a convention, and you might ask them a question afterward. I was with these people for a week, and so we played games together, we went to dinner together, we did just cool stuff, and so I kind of got to know them as people. And so then I picked up Dan Wells's Partials book. And I don't know why specifically this book did it, but I started reading that book. And the first chapter, maybe it was because I read it very close after the cruise. I got off the cruise and then I picked up that book and I read it within a month or something like that. I read that book and I heard Dan Wells in the first chapter of that book. That was the first time that it actually clicked to me, oh, their voice is just that author. It kind of makes sense when you think about it, but at the same time, it had never really clicked like that for me, because this was the first time I'd ever been around an author, a published author, in a informal type of way. They weren't just teaching a class or whatever, they were just a person and, we just talked and stuff like that. And then reading their book very shortly after, and the inflections that he had, the ways that he would make jokes, I read all of that in that book. Finally, voice made sense to me. And this is why it's one of those things where when I was writing the outline for this for this video, I was like, oh, I'll share examples of of these people with really strong voices. And I'm like, this is the exact same thing that my English teachers did, right? You can share with people, this is a very strong voice. This voice does this. This voice does that. That doesn't matter for you who is learning how to write. You are not going to have any of those people. You're not going to have Dan Wells's voice, right? You're not going to have Mary Robinette Kowal's voice. You're not going to have any of the other people that I had on that list. You're not going to have their voices because you're you. I think what happens is that, people will talk about voice because it is a very important thing. Like, I definitely can read books written by the authors that I've read a number of books by and be like, oh yes, I definitely can tell that this book was written by so-and-so, right? It's a very important part of what makes a book that author's. And at the same time, it's not something that you can get from somebody else. It's not something that you can really even learn from somebody else. When Brandon Sanderson took over the Wheel of Time series, he talks about the fact that he had to change his voice a little bit to be a little bit more like Robert Jordan's because that's what all the books before were written like. So you can do that, but he did that specifically with those books, and all of his books he writes with his normal voice. And that's the Brandon Sanderson voice. And I think one of the big problems that I had with figuring out what my own voice was is that as a woman, I encouraged by society to not be loud, not be out there, don't express yourself too much, too loudly, all this kind of stuff. I was having a discussion with my partner today, and they do the editing on my videos, and they were like, you need to talk louder because the first thing that I do when I pull your videos in is I turn it up. I have to turn it up way higher, right? And I'm like, I'm in my house and I'm embarrassed to talk loudly in my house. Like, part of your own voice is being comfortable with who you are. And I know that up until now, a lot of this has been very ephemeral, touchy-feely. Your voice is you and this, that, and the other thing. So now I'm actually going to give you some actionable tips for how you can discover your voice, or at least get a better idea of what your specific voice is. That way you can start noticing it. Your voice is already your voice, right? It's already going to be in your writing just because you're you. You can only write like you. You can be influenced by other people. It's very interesting to read anything of mine after I've read a post by Chuck Wendig because he has such a strong voice that it just like kind of falls into mine. Whatever it is that you're writing for an extended period of time, your voice is already there. You just want to be able to notice it. And once you're able to notice it, that's when you can kind of strengthen it a little bit. The first thing that you want to do is to think about the different ways that you talk to people, like in your everyday life. There's definitely a certain way that you talk when you go to work or you're in some sort of a professional setting. There's a certain way that you'll talk when you're talking to a stranger, like in a grocery store or something like that. And then there's a certain way that you'll talk to your family and your close friends, assuming that you don't have ridiculously high anxiety such that there really is no one that you are comfortable with. The close friends and family are going to be the people that you're going to be the most natural with, right? You're just going to talk. You're going to maybe make jokes if that's the thing that you do. That is your more natural voice. If you don't have any people that you're familiar with, the way that you talk to your pets, we don't have any expectations of our pets making fun of us, and so it's easier. I'm, however, not talking about, oh, it's a kitty, oh my god, it's a kitty. That is not your voice, that is not your writing voice, but just the way that you talk to them because we all do it, we just talk to them like they're people, and they don't ever really respond to us, except sometimes we think that they do. I mean, they kind of do. They kind of understand us. Anyway, the way that you talk when you're super comfortable, that's going to be the start of recognizing your voice. What I want you to do, the actionable thing that you're going to do is you're going to write a note to somebody that you feel super comfortable with. If you and your mom have a great relationship, do that. If you have a best friend, or send a note to your cat and like literally just tell them about your day. Tell them about your frustrations, tell them a funny story that maybe happened, tell them how bored you were or whatever, and just talk to them. Write this note and talk to them in the most, nobody's ever going to read this, I am in my comfortable place, I'm only talking to people who love and accept me for everything that I am way. Write for about 5 to 10 minutes. Like, don't write a short little, I had a nice day and then I came home and I had a Dr. Pepper and then I went to bed. Like, that's too short. Since you're trying to find out your voice, you want to make sure that you are in that as naturally as you possibly can be. So once you've done that, you want to read that over, and then you are going to go pull something out of whatever your current work in progress is. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything in particular. It can have dialogue in it, whatever. And read that over, then just kind of compare the two. See if you can notice word choices that might be the same, like sentence structure that might be the same. All that kind of thing. And you might not notice it the first time. Like, this is definitely an exercise that I suspect you'll want to do a number of times, especially if your voice isn't very strong, and it might not be. Once you've read a couple of things of yours, pull something out that you know has a strong voice in it. You've probably got some book somewhere on your shelves that has a really strong voice in it. You want to read that, compare that to your writing, and then what you want to do is to take like a section out of that book, and you want to rewrite it as if you were the one writing it. You're not copying it word for word. If, the person, it's like, so-and-so walked down the road or something like that. Like, if you're the type of person who would write, this person ambled down the hall, or, whatever it is, right? Like, try and rewrite it in your voice. The way that you would change it is your voice coming through. And even if these exercises don't necessarily work right away, like, this doesn't mean that you don't have a voice. This exercise is more for learning to identify it so that you recognize it. Once I was aware of what I was really looking for when I looked for voice, that it was like literally the way that I talked, but only on the page, kind of, because, you don't talk and write exactly the same, but it's still... Once I had that in my head, once I had seen the thing with Dan and the way that Dan talked, like, I was able to see my own voice. So I've been able to lean into that more and strengthen it more. Truthfully, it works the best when you're not thinking about it, which I know is counterintuitive for this entire video, where, I'm talking about, oh, you want to notice your voice and, like, look for your voice and all this kind of stuff, but you kind of have to notice it before you can stop noticing it again, right? You need to know what it is that it's there so that you can then, it can become more natural. And I think that one of the reasons that we have so much trouble sometimes in accepting our voice is because writing, any creative pursuit, but writing is all about putting ourselves out there, a piece of ourselves out there, and having it be specifically our voice. That is part of the ourselves that is going out there. Even though the story might be about like elves and dragons, there's still the you-ness in your story, and that's a scary thing to put yourself out there like that. And I think that that's part of the reason why people have trouble recognizing their own voice. Number one, you're with it all the time. You talk and then words come out, and that is just how you talk, right? And so you don't notice it because it's just the normal thing. And then you read something like Charles Dickens and you're like, oh my gosh, Charles Dickens' voice is so different than mine, and it's a classic, so it must be amazing, right? And one of the things that you'll have to accept is that you might never have a ridiculously strong voice that, like, people stop and say, oh my gosh, that's absolutely so-and-so because their voice is so strong and whatever. But it is yours. It will be there, and you can learn to recognize it and make it stronger. It's okay if it's never something crazy. You have stories that you want to tell, and you're going to tell them in your voice because you are the only person who can tell your stories. Your voice is the only voice that you can use in order to tell those stories. It's not something you have to search for. It's not something you have to find. You already have it. You just need to learn to recognize it. And as you grow in confidence as a writer, it will strengthen and develop naturally. And then it will become your voice and the thing that people think of when they think of your books. All right, so if you like this video, go ahead and like this video. If you would like to hear more of my ramblings about the mental side of writing, go ahead and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Okay, bye-bye.